Hello and a warm welcome to It's Pointless with Parashar, and we have no holds barred here. Today in conversation with Mr. Arvind Tandon, who's a travel-preneur, been in business for 40 years. And I have been trying to have this conversation with him for quite some time now. So you want to hold on to your seats right to the end, and I promise you it's going to be fun and learn. So Arvind, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thanks. I'm so pleased to have been part of this journey, especially at the outset,
Exactly, the premiere show.
the premiere show.
Right. So, and I know that you had your set of reservations and concerns, but nevertheless, you agreed, and I'm really grateful that you did because I thought that it would be a very interesting story to hear you out in terms of not just your business experiences, but the unique perspective that I believe you have on life.
Thanks. I don't think I was reluctant for any reason except that I thought I was too small a fry to, be numero uno on this particular show. I thought you needed to commence this series with somebody who was more exalted, more senior in terms of the wealth that they had made,
Right.
in terms of their seniority in their industry. So that is why my reluctance.
Got that. You big enough for me.
Oh, yeah, physically in particular.
Absolutely, no doubt. So, when I found later, when you told me that you come from a family where your father was a government official, how did it start? Like how did you get into the travel business of all things such a long time back? I'm sure it must have been quite different given whatever people were up to during those days.
I think it's important to understand that the whole process of getting into the travel business, in my case, can be divided into 2 or 3 parts.
Okay.
My father was a government servant, and like all government servants, he also thought that since he was head of a division in the income tax department, I should be a chartered accountant,
Right. Okay. Okay.
which I wasn't too interested in because the chartered accountancy as a profession was dry and there were not too many women in it. And for me, women were such an integral part of my life.
Right.
So, therefore, when I was 18 or 19, I was going around with an American woman who was nearly twice my age.
Okay.
And when she and I decided that we would trot off to Kashmir for a naughty month,
Right. Okay.
and when I informed my father about that, he said, "Oh, but you're going to be joining your chartered accountancy now." And which is how I got into attempting to become a chartered accountant, which, as I said, mercifully I flunked. And when I did, I was asked what I wanted to get into then. Since travel and advertising were the 2 industries that had their fair share of women, I wanted to join one of those. And since the first job opportunity that I got was with Cox and Kings, which was a company that later on in our lives
Yeah.
went bankrupt. So therefore, that's how I got into travel. And then there was an opportunity to commence a business in the travel field with somebody, and that's how I got into that.
Got that. Fair enough. And what were some of the highlights or some key points that you would suggest somebody who's just about starting off their career? Like you're just starting out. What are some of the things that one should be watchful about or careful about?
I think it's important that people who are at the start of their careers in any industry, whether travel, advertising, or industry where they're running taxis or some such thing, they need to be careful about giving credit to customers because in the Indian context, people pay if they feel like it, and sometimes not at all. And a lot of clients are people that you are not in the know of or you're not familiar with. So they might just run off with your money. And in this, it isn't important that a person is a relative or a friend. Anybody could run off with your money and suddenly become a non-relative or a non-friend.
Got that. Fair enough. And I'm sure you must have had your fair share of successful moments as well, where you felt that, okay, I've really done well for myself.
Yes, I think the remarkable thing about the travel business as I ran it was that I kept changing the method of doing business, primarily because uh, things that kept affecting the quality or the profitability of our business kept happening, and that would keep me on my toes. So originally we did start as a basic travel agent where we were selling tickets and holidays, but at some stage I decided that it wasn't a viable business because one, because of the competition, the margins were very low, and also because we had to give credit to people and they wouldn't pay at all or at least very late. Therefore, we started wholesaling cruises, holidays, and tours rather than merely tickets. Also, in this method, offering an alternate source of income to retail travel agents. So I was the wholesaler, and a retail travel agent would buy from us and sell to his customer. And most importantly, the money came in first.
Right. That was the key. That was the most important thing. Okay. And what are some of the things where you realized that probably at a later stage that it didn't really work out the way you intended for it to, or there was a failure or a setback for you?
I think it's important to understand that failure is something uh, which happens because you don't know much about the business, or you think that you've done too well and therefore you cannot fail, or you haven't failed. But since I kept changing my business model, therefore I think I was pretty well off, and at the same time I could rove the world. And the people that I was dealing with kept changing from corporates at the beginning of my career to retail travel agents later, who were obviously beholden to you because you were providing them with an alternate business model and a second income facility.
So, like every other business, I'm sure the pandemic and the lockdown hit the travel industry the worst probably. How did you deal with that? And having said that, I mean, having seen through that phase now, what are you up to? What's next for you in life?
Um, as you mentioned, that the period when COVID struck as a pandemic, the whole world, but in particular the travel and hospitality industry, which was so effective, which was so affected. Therefore, what we had to do was, given the fact that the travel business shut down, the bottom fell out of it. So I had to think of an alternate business model for myself and other people as well, which I did. And I have launched something where we are promoting intergenerational tax-free wealth transfers from parents to children, and at the same time set up a second income model where everything is tax free for the next 30 years, which means it would outlive us. But it would still provide an alternate income to either your children or your spouse or nominees. And last but not least, whatever you've invested, you would get back as a corpus after 30 years, which is completely tax free. So, this is a model that I thought had the same protocol as the travel business. There were commissions, there were trainings, and there was the ability to make reservations for the product on either your phone or on your laptop.
Got that. So this is in the domain of financial planning, to put it correctly.
Yes, it is in the domain of financial planning.
Right.
And in the Indian context, of course, it is in the domain of insurance, because in India, only insurance can give tax-free returns.
Right.
But it isn't something that I particularly talk about, because in the Indian context, if you tell people that you're selling insurance, they're not interested.
People don't want to talk to you again.
They don't.
Right. Now I'm sure 40 years is a long time, and you have a lot of stories that you could tell us. But tell us something that really stands out in particular, especially for the audience, that they would love to listen to, or you think at least people would love to listen to.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure there are plenty of anecdotes that I can relate. But I think the one that really stands out is the one relating to somebody who's now the wealthiest man in India, of him offering me a partnership with himself.
Wow. Okay.
His name is Mukesh Ambani,
Okay.
and he wanted to set up a travel company. So he asked one of his minions to provide him the contact of somebody or the other, and I was the one chosen. And I had a meeting with him, and after confabulating with him for a couple of hours, he said, "Why don't we start tomorrow?"
Wow.
And of course, I asked him, I said, "Hey, what percentage?" Imagine, I'm asking a person of that business eminence
Right.
what percentage he would give me. And he pointed to himself and he said 51%, and he pointed to me and he said 49%. And we actually broke off, and the opportunity did not happen, primarily because I insisted that it should be 50-50.
Right. Got that. Fair.
So that is, it's not something I regret, but it is something that could be the highlight story of anyone's life.
I'm sure it could be. So it was really a lot of fun. Most importantly, listening to you speak. There's a lot of learning as well. I learned a lot of things for myself in terms of whatever it is that you were sharing, and the story was definitely very interesting. So and the fact that I've been trying to have this conversation with you for such a long time, I can safely tell you that it's been worth my while. So thank you very much, Arvind. Thank you very much for being here today.
And mine as well. Thanks.
I'm glad you think so. That's very generous of you. Thank you. So thank you very much for being here on this conversation, the first premier show of its Pointless with Parashar, and I had none other than Arvind Tandon with me. I hope you had fun, and we will be back soon with another episode. In the meanwhile, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.